Welcome to another episode of the Essential Craftsman podcast. I'm Nate. If you're brand new to our podcast and this is your first episode, I really recommend you click on a different one. And the reason is, this is going to be a solo episode by me. It's the first time I've ever done this, and it's not going to give you the best taste of what this show is like on a regular basis. Normally, my dad's here or another guest, and that's not the case today. But we've got some items of business. I think you will enjoy it, especially if you're a fan of our YouTube videos and a regular listener of the podcast. Let's get right into it. A week ago, my family and I went to the coast. It's an hour-and-a-half drive. And while we were there, I met this guy on the beach who owns a sawmill. And by sawmill, I mean really a huge lumber business. He started it when he was younger, I think maybe 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. And if you've listened to any of our lumber and forestry and logging videos with my dad, you've probably heard him say that back in the day, there was like 200 or 300 or 400 sawmills in Douglas County. And now today, there might be like 10. And this guy's mill is one of those. And I asked him last weekend what he attributed his ability, his mill's ability to withstand all of the fluctuations and changes and that have happened in the timber industry when so many of the other mills, the vast majority, were not able to and went out of business, and his mill is alive and well and doing better than ever. And he said that they had to remake themselves. I think he said dozens, but I kind of understood him to mean maybe like 15 or 20. But by remake, I mean they had to completely change their business, the customer, the type of product they were making. And he said in most cases, they had to completely rework and reassemble and reinvent their tooling and the saws and how they were even making the product. And he said it has basically been a regular thing over the decades that every so long, everything changes and they have to kind of adapt and adjust accordingly. I bring this story up because I want to relate it to some of the decisions we've been making in Essential Craftsman recently. And before you worry or panic a little bit, no, we're not making any big changes to the channel or the type of content we release on Essential Craftsman. We really are in a good groove with that, to be honest, now that we've kind of have a system for putting out these Spec House videos. We have a growing backlog of tools to review, pro tip videos to make, and a pretty big list of sort of philosophy of work vlogs that my dad would like to make. So we're in really good shape, and I have no interest, and neither does my dad, I don't think. I won't speak for him, but I certainly have no interest in changing the way that channel and that content works. We just really feel like we've got lightning in a bottle there, and there's no need to adjust it. But, where the change and the reinvention is going to be happening is here on the second channel and the podcast. And please allow me to explain. The reason that we started the podcast over a year ago, the main reason was I wanted to practice speaking into a microphone and looking in a camera and making videos. It just felt like a skill that can only be developed through practice, and the only way to practice is to actually do it. And what is even more important than actual practicing, at least with video work I found, is then actually sharing it and posting it and being done with it. I'm the type of person, even when I'm texting, who will rewrite a text 14 times till it's perfect. And you can't have that habit with video work because you'll just never be satisfied. So I feel like that it's been helpful in that way. But the trouble that we're running into is, it's been 2 weeks, maybe 3 since we recorded our last podcast, which was the interview with John Brand, who, if you didn't listen to that, by the way, and you're a fan of my dad and you know a lot about him, I think you should. I think you would really enjoy it. If you want to learn more about my dad, it really fills a gap of an important time of his life that we have never talked about. And if you listen to that interview, I think that might be the last piece of the puzzle for you to kind of understand who he is and how he got to be the man he is. It kind of is the missing link of how is it that this carpenter is so comfortable speaking, teaching, and presenting. It really kind of brings that into focus. So I hope you caught that. And John was terrific, by the way. That guy was really fun, and I could have just sat there for a couple more hours and listened to him talk about music, and hopefully he'll come back. Anyways, that was a few weeks ago, and it has been hard to get my dad back over here to record another podcast because he is a busy guy. He's building this spec house. He's interacting with all of the subs. He has family and church responsibilities like all of us, and we record this at my house, which is on the other side of town. And he has higher priorities than this podcast, like our regular content, which I think you'd be amazed if you knew how much time went into it. Not even just from me editing and kind of working at the computer, but he spends a lot of time, an enormous amount of time, reviewing the drafts and critiquing things that didn't come out quite right, and of course recording the voiceover narration. So point being that for him, recording podcasts is not quite as high on his list of priorities, but it is on mine, and I would like to do more of it. And so what's going to happen going forward with this podcast, and I hope that you stick with it, I'm going to kind of expand the range of topics that we cover. And I don't really have an interest in doing a lot of these solo episodes and talking and sharing my own thoughts and feelings. I'm much more interested in an interview-based show. There's a lot of areas of just kind of human experience that I feel like are so interesting that I know so little about, and I feel like I'm developing a good instinct for asking the types of questions that other people like me might have about topics like, science and culture and history, for example. Politics to an extent, although there's enough of that out there, and I think we all get enough of that just beat into our heads from being alive these days. So I don't think that'll be a big part of it, but I'm giving you fair warning that I'm going to bring on some more guests covering more topics outside of workbench, hobby, craft, and the trades. There will be more of that. For example, I've got an interview lining up, I hope. It's not set in stone, with the fellow who makes electric guitars. That's a neat kind of baby step out of our workbench hobby world, because that is still a craft. It's very much a trade, I guess, and I don't know much about it, but I'm interested in it, and I hope that you will stick with me as I kind of hopefully get better and learn more myself, ask some questions that I don't know, and expand my base of general knowledge and understanding. So that's what I wanted to talk about and share. I should mention two other things while we're talking about this as fair warning, and that is, and I kind of hate to admit it, but it's the truth, and that is my own interest, and where I have a feeling a large portion of these interviews and conversations will head is in small business and entrepreneurship and everything that entails, which is really vast. And I don't want to say like self-help, because that's really a turn-off phrase, even for me, especially for me. But it's still what I'm interested in. It's what I pay attention to. It's what I think about. And so I have a feeling that to some extent, those types of guests and conversations will be predictable on our podcast going forward. Before you panic too hard and unsubscribe with this new information, my top goal is always going to be to have my dad here as a co-host, and every chance that he can get away and sit and have the types of conversations and where we can mine him for his own experience and his just instinctual sort of, it's not philosophy. He's just such a teacher, and I think sometimes it just comes out of him. Sometimes you don't even know what sometimes I can't even predict what, really helpful nugget he's going to pull out of his pocket, but we got to get him sitting here talking in order to make that happen. So that is still goal number 1. So don't think that I'm kicking him off the show or that we're heading different directions. It's nothing like that. I want to have regular content. It's good for our business. And as you certainly know by now, Essential Craftsman is a business for us. We've been full-time, both my dad and I now, for a few years. It is unbelievably satisfying and fun and fulfilling in every single way. We feel like the luckiest men alive. So this is the direction that we're kind of heading with this. I'm going to fill the gaps in the show. If there's weeks without my dad sitting down here or other guests, I'm going to fill it with things that might not be your first. It might not be what you expect from an Essential Craftsman podcast or YouTube video, but I give you my word, it's going to be the most valuable and interesting and helpful and positive and clean content that we can create, no matter what it's about. And I do think there's a lot of interesting topics out there that I know very little about. And if you're a curious person, if you have any amount of instinct for absorbing and growing, and if you're busy, like most of us, podcasts really are one of the best places to absorb. I'm going to try to make the content that I personally would enjoy listening to myself. So as always, you can leave feedback in the comments on YouTube. We pay attention there, and if there's strong sentiment one way or the other, we can always adjust. But if you have an idea for a guest or a topic that might be interesting, in fact, guests will be the most helpful, because sometimes just locating individuals is half the battle. And we've received a few. In fact, someone sent a recommendation for a geologist. Several months ago, we were talking about how little we knew about geology, and someone shared a professor who could be brought on. And that's exactly the kind of thing I'm excited and interested in doing more of. We will catch you next time. Have a great week, everybody. Enjoy the end of summer, and we'll catch you next time.